Nolan McLean was brilliant. Carson Benge continues to shine, but AJ Ewing couldn't come through when it mattered most. And Kodai Senga finally gave up a run out of that late inning role, and the Mets dropped their series to the White Sox.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. On today's show, we got a pretty interesting Mets game to discuss. Came down to the wire. They showed some grit, and Nolan McLean pitched outstanding, but they ultimately lose their series against the White Sox. In the first segment, we're going to talk specifically about McLean and what was another quality start. In the second segment, we'll talk about that end of the game of the New York Mets. Had a chance but couldn't quite pull it off. And then in the final segment, I want to revisit, I believe it was the final segment of this morning's show or last night's live stream, how this team is still just not that far away. And I think it's exciting to look towards what 2027 can be because a couple pieces here, a couple pieces there. This is a team that's proven that they can win baseball games. This was a pretty impressive series. We'll start things off again with Nolan McLean. He absolutely carved through the White Sox the first time through. He strikes out 5 of the first 9 batters that he faced and didn't really run into any trouble until those 2 outs in the third inning when the lineup did turn over and he gave up a single and then he walked the bases loaded. But that was the only single that McLean, or the only hit that McLean would allow in this start. And he was able to find an escape hatch in that White Sox lineup, which was Andrew Benintendi, who he set down on 3 pitches. And I want to put my hand up right now and apologize to Mets fans who are watching that game because I jinxed it. You know, there's times as a fan where you feel like something that you said might have blown a game for your team. You know, that superstition inside. Well, the Mets are playing the White Sox right now, and the White Sox, or we're just playing the White Sox. And I've got a good friend of mine, Elijah Evans, who covers the White Sox for us with just baseball and is a White Sox fan. And, you know, I just did a little bit of ribbing about the fact that Andrew Benintendi is such a nice escape hatch in that lineup because there's so much young power and thump that you have to be wary of. When you get to the Andrew Benintendi spot in the lineup with the bases loaded, you know, it's a good feeling. I felt like McLean was going to handle that situation, and he did. But later on in this game, Andrew Benintendi, of course, would be the guy that puts the first run on the board for the White Sox. So that one's on me. I will own that. After that, though, as far as getting back to McLean's outing here, he bounced back. And at this point, remember, he just had a third inning where he loaded the bases. He really ran up his pitch count, over 20 pitches in that inning. Comes out the next inning and throws a 7-pitch 1-2-3 frame. Was really seeking bats, trying to get that early contact, trying to get deeper into the game. And that really doesn't allow him to get through 6. In the 5th inning, McLean nearly gives up a home run. Luis Robert Jr. made a nice leaping catch at the wall, but it was one of those catches where probably didn't need to leap. You know, he timed a jump that he didn't maybe need, but regardless, nice catch at the wall. And for McLean, he ends up hitting a batter in that 5th inning with a back foot sweeper, but he puts up another 0. And then in the 6th inning, he did walk Benintendi, the 4th walk that McLean issued throughout his start, but he retired the other 3 batters and was able to complete 6 for another quality start. Nolan McLean is just becoming a walking quality start. It seems like every time he takes the ball, he's giving the Mets a good outing. His last 3 outings, it has been 6 innings each time. He gave up 1 run in his start against the Braves on the 11th, and then 1 run against the Padres on the 17th. No runs in this one. You look at the hits allowed, he has 2 of those 3 starts where he only gave up 1 hit. Only 1 hit allowed to the Braves, only 1 hit allowed to the White Sox. He's just continued to lower that ERA. He's now down to a 3.21 ERA on this season. If you remember the last time McLean started on this show, I was talking about, okay, what's the Rookie of the Year path for Nolan McLean? And what I mentioned was if he was able to finish off his final 7 starts, giving up 8 earned runs or less, he could lower his ERA under 3. And if he maintained similar strikeout rates and similar innings pitched per start, if he continued on the averages we had seen over his previous 7 starts, you'd be looking at a year where he would go over 180 innings pitched, over 200 strikeouts, and get his ERA under 2. Now, with this one outing, he took a 3.34 again and dropped it to a 3.21. 3.21. Anyway, if he continues to put up starts like this, if he goes out next time and shoves again and it's 6 scoreless, well, all of a sudden you can get under 3 a lot faster with your ERA, and he can continue to rack up strikeouts. So this was a really good start for Nolan McLean again. And you look at the schedule, he's going to have a start against the Astros this upcoming weekend, probably at Citi Field. He's going to have a start against the Yankees potentially in Yankee Stadium. He might have a start against the Phillies at home. Might have a start against the Rangers with the Rangers pushing for a playoff spot. So McLean has a chance, even though the Mets aren't in a race, to pitch in games that have a lot of eyeballs on them and continue to improve that case. Because, again, you look at what the numbers will be at the end of this season if Nolan McLean continues to pitch the way he has, and you are looking at a guy who absolutely can win Rookie of the Year. The thing is, he also, I think, just has to finish, top 3 in Cy Young voting at some point for the Mets to get a draft pick as well. And Nolan McLean could absolutely do that, not necessarily this year, but next season. I think the one thing that I would look at right now, as you are trying to imagine the 2027 Mets. I did a show earlier this week. Is it Scooble or bust? And if you're trying to get an ace in this free agent class, if you're talking about a bona fide, no doubt about it, ace, a guy that is definitely better than Nolan McLean, that might be the one guy, but that's a testament to how good Nolan McLean is. Because, yeah, Michael King's on the market. Freddie Peralta's on the market. But no, Michael King's on the market. Clay Holmes. Those are the two guys that I think the Mets would maybe target. If the Mets sign either of those guys, Nolan McLean is still probably the ace going into next season. That might still be Nolan McLean's start on opening day. And consider where he was at one point this season, where he really had to go through some struggles. He's come out the other side of it. And I think if you're looking at a rookie season for a guy that is going the marathon the first time, making 32 starts in the big leagues in one season, I think this is the type of arc that you'd like, right? He came out the gates, started off really well, just like he ended last season in the big leagues. And then he had to go through it a little bit, but he made it to the other side of those struggles. And now he's putting together his best baseball yet. So I think at the end of the day, regardless of Rookie of the Year, future Cy Young consideration, draft picks, like all that stuff set it aside, when you look at where the Mets are at building their next winner, Nolan McLean is a very prominent part of that. You have a frontline starter here. You want to call him an ace, you want to call him a number 2, you think they should go out and get Scooby, you think they should make a big trade, whatever it is. There's arguments on all sides. But what I will say about Nolan McLean pretty definitively is he can be a frontline starter for you. Nolan McLean can be your 1 or your 2. And that's a big thing to find. A homegrown frontline starter. The Mets have not had one of those since the last team that went to the World Series, where they had a lot of those. And obviously none of them stuck with the Mets very long outside of Jacob deGrom. But still, that was a time where you developed a lot of frontline pitching. And some of them were more flashes in the pan, like Harvey and Syndergaard. Wheeler and DeGrom ended up being guys who are authoring Hall of Fame careers that came from your farm system. Should have kept, probably Zach Wheeler. But now you finally developed another guy that can be a frontline pitcher for you. And so this is, again, just another really quality outing from McLean, who, by the way, only needed 92 pitches to get through those 6 innings. So really good outing from him. And you'd say, all right, he has a much easier chance to sprint through the tape. We kind of talked about the Rookie of the Year and Carson Benge and McLean, and how McLean might have a better opportunity to sprint through the tape of his season because he's a pitcher and he can string together 7 really great starts, and that might be easier than Carson Benge stringing together 6 straight weeks of baseball. But then again, maybe Carson Benge just does that because he had another great game today and nearly won it for the Mets. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think it's going to hit a home run today or tomorrow or Tuesday, the next time the Mets play, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. And if you're right, you're going to see a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's game, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep, and now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. Are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. If you're watching the live stream on YouTube right now, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 18,000 subscribers. Now, the New York Mets did not have much going offensively in this game. Francisco Lindor led things off in the first with the double, and the Mets couldn't bring him home. In retrospect, if you knew the game you're about to play, you would have played some small ball and bunted him to third and tried to score him, but unfortunately, the Mets just could not put up a big number in the first after I felt like it when you lead off the game with the double. A.J. Ewing in the second inning had an infield single that could have sparked a rally, but Luis Torrens hit into a double play, which really did kill things because Lindor would single after that. You could have maybe scored a run there. In the fourth inning, Luis Robert Jr. singled. Mets didn't do anything with it. Seventh inning, Carson Benge doubled, a ground rule double that was, and Robert drew a walk. So you had a chance there with 2 on, nobody out, and the White Sox go to the young Hagen Smith, who just has electric stuff, and he neutralized the Mets lineup, striking out Jared Young, Francisco Alvarez, and Marcus Semien to get through that seventh. I think the thing about this series, the Mets really did play a pretty good series, but the White Sox, I think, really showed why this team is leading that division, why I think they're going to win that division. They had a lot of fight. Sean Manaea is sitting with the 4-0 lead in the first game of the series and cruising, and they battle back with 3 straight home runs to even things up and win that game late. And then you look at this game. They hung in there on a bullpen day and were able to keep the Mets bats at bay after they scored 10 runs the night before. And when it mattered, they got the big hits when they needed to. Dedniel Nunez put up a scoreless 7th and a good weekend for him. He went back-to-back and put up zeros in both appearances. So settling in nicely right now, Dedniel Nunez becoming more and more in that circle of trust to pitch and leverage, and a guy that could be a big part of the Mets next season. But again, credit to the White Sox against Daniel Duarte, who has been lights out. Miguel Vargas able to just put together a great at-bat, hang in there, and on a 7-pitch battle, finishes it off with a base hit. Andrew Benintendi, I mentioned, it was on me, guys. I'm the reason the Mets lose this game because I mocked Benintendi earlier to my friend, and Benintendi ends up having, well, not the game-winning hit, but what looked like it could have been as he doubled home Vargas. He advanced to third, though, on the throw, and Daniel Duarte able to strike out the next 2 batters to strand that runner, which ultimately ends up pushing this game to the bottom of the 9th because the Mets in the top of the 9th are able to scratch a run themselves. Bo Bichette grabbed that in the first pitch that they saw, but Carson Benge flared one into left field for a single. Luis Robert Jr. didn't try to play hero. He took his walk. That allowed Jared Young to play hero. He ripped a single up the middle that drove in Carson Benge, and all of a sudden, you had a chance to win the game. Francisco Alvarez, though, just had a pretty brutal at-bat. He was sitting 2-1 on a pitcher that had been wild. He had walked Luis Robert Jr. He had started off Jared Young 3-0 before finally throwing a couple strikes, and Jared Young on the 3-1 pitch got the single. So he's wild. And he goes to a slider that was nowhere near the zone. Francisco Alvarez could have been sitting 3-1. Instead, he ends up behind the count. Then Alvarez takes a fastball low, which evens it. But again, at that point in time, you could have walked. You could have been sitting on first base with the bases loaded. Marcus Semien would walk after that. So the New York Mets could have brought home wouldn't have been the winning run in retrospect, as the White Sox were able to score in the bottom of the 9th. But again, you absolutely should have scored in that spot if not for Francisco Alvarez, who again just had a really bad at bat. This is the thing with Alvy. It comes and goes. He is a very streaky hitter, and he is going through a cold stretch right now that he needs to snap out of. But that really does kind of kill the rally. I know A.J. Ewing had a chance as well at the bases loaded, and he didn't come through. But I can forgive the rookie, A.J. Ewing, a little bit more in that spot when it's not like he really beat himself too much. He got beat, but he didn't really beat himself. First pitch to A.J. Ewing was a curveball that just clipped the top of the zone. He challenged it, probably shouldn't have, but regardless, you can't blame him for not pulling the trigger on that pitch. good luck hitting that pitch, right? Then he's able to be patient, gets himself into a hitter's count, and then he gets a fastball and he swings at it. He just can't hit it. It's a 97-mile-per-hour fastball up and in, and he's just beaten by the pitch. And then, instead of trying to go back to a slider or something, it's not like AJ Ewing chases. It's another pitch in the strike zone, fastball up and away at 99 miles per hour, and he just blows it by him and he swings through it. So it's like AJ Ewing is at bat, even though he didn't come through, even though he has been brutal lately, just like Francisco Alvarez. You can defend that a little bit more than Francisco Alvarez expanding the zone on a wild pitcher who you had on the ropes when that could have resulted in a walk. He swung at two pitches outside of the zone. AJ Ewing took a pitch that was dotted, a curveball up and away, and then swung at two fastballs that were in the strike zone and just couldn't connect with them. And at the end of the day, you want AJ Ewing to get to the point that he can, in a really big spot, get on top of that fastball and put it in play and make something happen with his legs or whatever it is. You want to see him not strike out in that spot and do something with those two fastballs that he got, and you never know what could have happened. But, again, it's defendable. Francisco Alvarez, that's not as defendable, and he really does have to break out of this slump because he's getting outplayed right now by Luis Torrens by a considerable margin. I don't think Torrens is going to stay on this heater. But, Alvarez, these are the questions that you have at times with him. Came off the bench, replaced Brett Beatty in this game, and in his two at-bats, he struck out twice. So, not a good day for Francisco Alvarez. Not a great day for the Mets lineup. They did out-hit the White Sox 7-5, but they went 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position, just could not come through with the opportunities that they did have, and they ultimately lose this series. But the team's still playing some pretty good baseball. You look at this past week and you say, all right, you beat a good Padres team and you took the White Sox to the very end, another good baseball team. And it doesn't really matter what your record is at the end of the season. So these are the kind of moral victories that you take. You move on from it. You have an off day on Monday. And then you get to play another really good team in the Brewers who are going to come into town, and you'll see if you can actually hang with them. So what I want to talk about in the final segment is kind of building off of what we talked about on the show after yesterday's game, which is just the fact that you are seeing signs of what this team has that could be good enough to be a winning club next season with the right few moves this offseason. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So I think a good thought exercise when you're looking at this Mets team is go back to where they were at the end of last season and where they're at the end of this season. At the end of last season, they had just collapsed and fallen out of the playoffs. And then there was some big questions with the free agents that you had. You were looking at Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz, who are hitting the market. That's your closer and your second best hitter. You were looking at on the pitching or on the side of your core, guys like Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil, who you were trying to decide if you wanted to remain and continue to double down on that core, or you wanted to move on, and they made the choice to move on. So once you made those trades and you're looking at what the Mets had to build, they had Lindor and Soto in place. They had their catching situation in place. But first base, question mark. Second base, you plugged it with the Nimmo trade. In retrospect, you maybe didn't plug it very well. Third base, it was going to be Beatty, but you still had to replace Pete Alonso in the lineup. Your outfield, you had Soto, and you felt pretty good that Benge could win a job in spring training, but he still had to win that job. And you had Tyrone Taylor in center field. And so they made all the moves that they did. Look at where they're at now with their lineup going into next season. Because Carson Benge, now you say, all right, that's one of your best players in right field. You're going to get Juan Soto back healthy the next season. You have Francisco Lindor. If Bo Bichette opts in, you feel pretty good about the left side of your infield. And you feel very good about your catching situation. And AJ Ewing, despite his struggles, he's your starting center fielder next year. So you just go around, and this team has gained so much throughout the season with the improvements from the farm system to this big league roster, potentially having a frontline starter in Nolan McLean, and having two guys that can bat in the top four in your lineup with Ewing and Benge. So you add that in one season, and you look at what's coming, and you look at what you've also developed on the pitching side with Zach Thornton, with Christian Scott, with now in the bullpen, Nate Lavender, Duarte. Like, you have answered so much internally that you go into this offseason, and yeah, I think that you go out and get a starting pitcher that's reliable, a veteran, to slot into that rotation. Of course, they have to add to their bullpen, and it probably makes sense to figure out how to get another bat into your lineup, whether that's in the outfield or a DH spot. But what they had to rebuild upon when they traded Nemo and McNeil and they let Alonso and Diaz walk, where they were at from then to now, they're in a much better spot than they were a year ago. And they have a better, well, I don't know about a better farm system because they have McLean and Benge and all those guys, but because those guys are young and cost controlled on your roster, it's not they disappeared, even though they disappeared from your farm system. Like, your young core is improved, regardless of the fact that your farm system rankings certainly aren't improved when you had 7 top 100 prospects and now you have 1. But your depth when you have the young talent already entrenched on the big league roster and then what you need moving forward, it's big. I mean, you've literally, if you go into the upcoming season with 3 spots in your rotation locked in from what you saw this previous year, that's a great growth year for a franchise to have collectively watch the seasons of McLean, Scott, and Thornton. And you'll just see where things go from here. But I think the Mets are in a pretty good spot, and I'm excited to watch the rest of this season. Again, they got nothing to play for. They're just spoilers. They're right back to 13 games under 500. You know, you could have little moral things that you could play for, a little moral victory, like I've talked about, of, hey, maybe the Mets, play to get out of last place. They're only a game and a half behind the Nationals. So I feel like that's a very attainable goal. Get yourself out of the cellar and just continue to compete, The Mets also, hey, another little thing you play for, you can finish this season with a winning record at home. If you have a good homestand and finish off your last few homestands strong, you're 5 games under there. So just little moral things. Just try to find ways to keep playing for each other, try to continue to develop. And the more that this team plays well, the more that you'll learn about what you have for next year. Like, if Dedniel Nunez puts together a great month of September, well, now you feel good about Nunez, you feel good about Duarte, you feel good about Lavender in that bullpen, along with getting Devin Williams back. And now you're in a much better place going into next season, knowing that there has at least some foundation of a bullpen where you don't need to sign 4 arms this offseason and try to cobble something together. So it's an interesting place to see the Mets in right now. But, I mean, this team is just so much more enjoyable to watch compared to what it had been. And I think it's going to get to a point, I don't know if you all feel this way. I know I feel this way, where there was a large stretch of this season where I was ready for it to be over. And now I feel like we're going to get to the end of this year, and I'm still going to get sad when the season ends because we know that there's no more baseball until the end of March at the soonest, as far as real games that matter. And there's a lockout that you're going to immediately start thinking about as the backdrop to the postseason that the Mets are not going to be a part of. And then potentially a long winter of waiting it out and seeing what happens. So enjoy these games while you can. I think this team is very fun to watch right now. Get out to the ballpark if you're in the area. Brewers, Astros this week. That's what, probably one of the last 3 homestands? Pretty much. I mean, it's almost like one of the last 2 homestands because you have one series on the road after that where you go to Tampa, square off against the Rays, and then you come back to face the Giants, and then you hit the road to go play the Marlins. You play the Yankees at Yankee Stadium, as I mentioned earlier, and then you have your last homestand of the season, Orioles, Phillies. So you only got, 5 more chances, 5 more series to catch the New York Mets at home. And so it'll be interesting to see how they finish things off here. I appreciate all of you who tuned in to the live stream. I appreciate all of you who will either watch the replay on YouTube or, of course, listen to the replay on the audio side of things. Tomorrow's show, full minor league recap of everything that happened this past week. I'm actually curious here. Rumble Ponies win? I mean, if I'm going to watch some postseason baseball this year, I need these Rumble Ponies to make it happen. So I'm curious. We'll be talking about the game. I know Rojas homered. They won again. Yep, they won again. 7-3. Binghamton Rumble Ponies keep on galloping towards the playoffs. Yes, that'll be fun to recap everything from Binghamton, from Syracuse on tomorrow's show. Jonah Tong had another good start. Does it make sense for him to get a little bit of run down the stretch here on the big league roster? A lot of fun stuff that we'll be talking about on that show. So again, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.